Revenant Hunter just got a lot stronger in PvP. With the new season, again, comes new aspects and fragments for our stasis subclasses. With that being said, and as of the making of this video, we now have access to a total of 4 aspects and 14 fragments. Initially, this was fairly simple which fragments were going to be good because, well, there just weren't that many to choose from. But now that we have access to this many options, I wanted to put together a video that goes over some of the more synergistic combinations to use for your hunter builds in the Crucible. Let's start by going over what's new. This season, hunters can get the new aspect called Touch of Winter. This gives your Cold Snap, Duskfield, and Glacier grenades increased functionality. Glacier grenades will spawn an extra stasis crystal totaling 6, and also changes its formation from a straight line to a circular shape. Duskfields get an increase to their slow field size and create a small stasis crystal upon impact of the grenade. Finally, Cold Snap's Seeker travels farther, faster, and chains 1 additional time. This immediately becomes one of, if not the best aspects in the game, especially with how the stasis grenades currently function. Next, let's go over the 4 new fragments that we now have access to. Whisper of Hunger increases the melee energy gained from picking up stasis shards. It also, unfortunately, has 2 negative stat modifiers, -10 to both mobility and recovery. While the function of this fragment is actually quite good, the 2 negative stat mods are probably going to turn a lot of players away, especially hunters. Whisper of Rending states that kinetic weapons do increased damage to stasis crystals and frozen targets. A decent benefit if you're frequently able to freeze someone, but with the damage nerf to kinetic weapons against frozen targets a while back, you'd honestly probably just be better off pulling out your secondary, whatever it is, and just cleaning up the kill. Save your fragment slot for something a little more impactful. Next, we have Whisper of Conduction, which states that nearby stasis shards track to your position. If you're familiar with how Thorn and the remnants that get left behind after you get a kill with it work, then this is basically how Whisper of Conduction works. Anytime you are near a stasis shard, the little icicles that you can pick up to gain a chunk of your melee energy, they will start to track towards you wherever you are. We also get 2 positive stat modifiers just for having this fragment equipped, +10 to both resilience and intellect. This fragment alone is an incredibly good option to use with one of the builds that we're going to talk about later. And the fact that we also get +10 to both resilience and intellect, which are 2 very important stats to focus on during this current meta with 120 hand cannons, this should be a fragment to highly consider incorporating into your build. Lastly, we have Whisper of Rime, which states that collecting a stasis shard grants a small amount of overshield, which falls off after 10 seconds. Collecting additional shards adds to the overshield and refreshes the timer. As you can see in the clip here, each time you collect the stasis crystal, it will restart the 10-second timer on the left-hand side of your screen. There's a lot to like about this fragment. One of the really cool things about it is that even though it only describes it as giving overshields, it actually gives you back straight up health if you don't currently have your shields up. In other words, if you're in a primary fight, lol, and you end up coming out on top, you're probably not sitting there with full health. When you collect those stasis shards, it will actually give you back your regular health before it starts giving you the overshield. It gives you about 33 to 34 health back, which is right around 1/3 of your health. Then once you have all of your regular health back, it starts adding to that overshield. Whisper of Rime and Whisper of Conduction paired with the Hunter aspect Grim Harvest instantly become a top tier option in PvP. Just be sure to spec for a high strength stat and you'll be good to go. Alright, so those are all the new things that we've got this season. Let's go over builds. As I said earlier, I wanted to go over some different builds that I think are going to be some of the strongest to use right now on the Revenant Hunter subclass. So I've got 3 that I'd like to talk about today, and each of them are utilized for something very specific with the Stasis subclass. First, let's go over the build that I so creatively called the Max Fragment build. My fellow Hunter bros can finally experience the full effect of our kit now, because this is the first time, thanks to our new aspect, that we are now able to apply 4 different fragments at the same time. In this build, we're going to be using Gambler's Dodge and the Cold Snap Grenade. For our 2 aspects, we're going to use Grim Harvest, which drops those stasis shards anytime we defeat a slowed or frozen combatant, and anytime we pick up those shards, we get a chunk of our melee energy back. We're also going to use Touch of Winter for enhanced Cold Snap functionality. But the real reason we're using these 2 aspects together is so that we can apply 4 fragments all at once. The first of which is going to be Whisper of Conduction, which will make it so that those stasis shards we create, thanks to Grim Harvest, will now track to us if we are in the vicinity of them. We also get plus 10 resilience and intellect, Megapog. Next is going to be Whisper of Impetus. I threw this one in here because we should be able to use our melee energy pretty frequently in this build. With Impetus, anytime we damage a target with our melee, it will reload all of our stowed weapons, and it also gives a temporary weapon ready speed boost. And with Quick Draw recently getting the big nah fam from Bungie, while also being removed from Felwinter's and Astral, this can maybe make the nerf feel a little less drastic. Whisper of Rime is going to be the next one, which will give us that health and shield boost whenever we collect those stasis shards from Grim Harvest. And finally, Whisper of Durance, which will make those slow duration from our shurikens last longer. We also get a plus 10 to our strength stat. Again, all in all, this build is really only meant to capitalize on the fact that hunters can now apply 4 fragments at one time. You can obviously switch these fragments around to cater to whatever you'd like to play as well. The next build I wanted to go over is one that probably would have been used more in the past, but with a few nerfs to the core of this build, there probably won't be as many people doing it. However, like I said earlier, this new hunter aspect is changing things. This is what I call the new Shatterdive build. In this build, again, we're going to be using Gambler's Dodge and Glacier Grenade. Our 2 aspects will be Shatterdive aspect, which is pretty self-explanatory, and the Touch of Winter aspect. The whole focus of this build is to absolutely juice our Glacier Grenade. Not only are we able to max out its damage potential, but we do have some room for some advanced playability as well, which I'll get into here in a little bit. For this build, we're able to apply 3 different fragments. First, we're going to throw on Whisper of Fissures, which will actually increase the damage and the size of the burst when we destroy a stasis crystal. This is an absolute essential fragment to have for this build. This is what puts that Glacier Grenade damage over the top, capable of shutting down most supers. Next, we're going to add one of my favorite fragments, Whisper of Chains. Anytime you're near a frozen target or a friendly stasis crystal, you take 25% less damage, which means that any 120 hand cannon with no damage buffs active has to either hit 3 headshots or 2 head and 2 body shots to kill you. The combination of the current meta, the 25% damage reduction when standing near crystals, and that it also gives you plus 10 for your recovery. Yeah, if you plan on running the Glacier Grenade, you should always have Whisper of Chains applied. The final fragment for this build is going to be Whisper of Shards, which boosts our grenade recharge rate after we shatter a stasis crystal. Shattering more crystals will continue to increase the duration of this benefit. So, in situations where we use our Glacier Grenade more aggressively, i.e. Shatterdiving, as soon as we destroy those crystals, we start to see a timer appear on the left-hand side. While this timer is active, our grenade recharge rate gets reduced. And every time you destroy a stasis crystal, it will refresh that timer. It also comes with a plus 10 resilience stat bonus. The Shatterdive build is targeted around that Glacier Grenade, and with the new aspect increasing the number of crystals that spawn whenever you throw it, you can certainly find yourself in situations where you can use it both offensively and defensively. The third build we'll go over today is probably my favorite build. It's the one that I've been using a lot recently. This is the Shuriken build. So obviously this build is going to be focused on our melee and our melee charges. This build is similar to the max fragment build, but we've switched a few things around. So in this build, we're going to be using Gambler's Dodge, but we've switched back to Cold Snaps. The 2 aspects we're using are Grim Harvest and Winter's Shroud. This build is going to be centered around slowing people and making sure we capitalize by killing them so that we can create those stasis shards. With Winter's Shroud, this gives us the flexibility of slowing people both far away and up close, something that we weren't able to do with the other build. Our fragments are going to be Whisper of Conduction, Whisper of Rime, and Whisper of Durance. This is what I would call a fluid build. Fluid meaning, for the most part, it should be usable no matter what kind of playstyle you have. Aggressive, passive, tactical, using cover. This build is really solid for all types of players. 2 really big things that you'll need for this build to be at its max effectiveness are a high mobility stat and a decently high strength stat. I recommend getting your mobility stat to at least an 80. Anything above an 80 is going to be icing on the cake. Strength stat doesn't have to be super high because we have 2 charges and we're going to be collecting those shards pretty frequently. Anything above a 50 or a 60 should be fine for this build. If builds are your thing, please hit the subscribe button and leave a like. We will be doing a bunch more in the future. I appreciate your support. Thank you all very much for watching. We'll see ya.